sure it's just a sequential file. But it's stored in root, SD card, Android data. So root, SD card, Android data. Then listed under the package is actually where that gets stored. So under files, there's our file. All right. At any rate, initially when this loads, this goes out and this gets the path of the external file directory. That's that whole SD card, Android data, blah, blah, blah that we saw. All right. And it pulls out that enhanced slideshow data.ser file and it calls load slideshow task. If you notice then, regardless of whether it succeeds or not, I thought maybe that it did this only the first time, but it pops up the alert that says to add a new slideshow, press the menu button. Now, notice what we're doing here. Notice again that this is going to be in an asynchronous task. Any sort of task that we think is going to take, possibly a little bit of time. And again, a little bit of time, we're speaking on computer terms. We're not talking about hours. We're talking about, fractions of seconds. We put in an asynchronous task. That way, while it is loading up this sequential file with the information from it, if the user is interacting with it, like hitting the back arrow to go back to the previous activity, or whatever it is they're doing, the application can still respond to it. All right, if they hit the menu button while it's still loading them up, for example, it can go and continue to do that. All right, here we're going. We look to see if that slideshow file exists. We go and we pull a list from it. If there's an error, we create another thread to sort of pop up an exception. When we're done, we create our array list of slideshows. Again, because this is a thread, and this is an asynchronous thread, we have to know that this activity here, the reading of the files, is complete. Because we have to do something when it's complete. In this particular case, what we have to do is we have to take the array and display it in the list. So, that's what onPostExecute is actually doing. All right? This background task to load all the slideshows is run as an async task. When it's finished, it puts in this slideshow list an array of the names of the slideshows. We then, when it finishes, this callback function gets called, and we actually go and display those slideshows on the screen. questions about that? What I'd like to do is get to what happens when we say we want to add a new slideshow. If we look, that is done from the menu of this activity. We inflate the layout. Let's follow through what happens. We're viewing the application. Press the menu. We have the option for new slideshow. When we press that, we get a dialog to save it under some name or not. Set name. And then we're in edit mode. So let's follow through the code that makes that happen. Here's where we create the menu. All right. If they select the menu item, given that there's only one menu item, we don't have to do any testing to see which menu item they selected. All right? Because this menu simply has add new slideshow in it. So the add options item selected, I don't really have to test the item because I know that it has to be add new slideshow because that's the only menu option that exists on this particular screen. We do have to go and create the dialog to ask for the naming of that, which is what we do here. So we expand that layout XML. We create a view. We grab a pointer to the text for name. We pop up the alert. We have the positive button and the negative button. The positive button being the OK, the negative button being the cancel. So I go click here, click new slideshow. I have set name and cancel. Set name is a positive button, cancel is a negative button. I hit cancel, it simply closes out of that. Without doing anything. I hit the yes though. I look and grab the name from the dialog. See if there's a value for the name. If there is, I go in and I create a new slideshow. All right. And I start a new activity for Slideshow Editor. And I put, as part of this extra, a field called name. So I'm calling the Slideshow Editor activity. I'm invoking that. And I'm passing to it using using that extra data, which if you recall is one of the mechanisms that we use to pass data between activities. And then we start that activity. If the name is blank, we display a little toast message. And those toast messages are cool for like displaying error messages and all that. So the idea, like if I went to go and enter, try to save this without setting the name, when I click set name, up pops a little toast message that just sits there for a couple seconds, long enough for the person to read it. So I would suggest you try using those in some of your applications, like for displaying error messages, or for displaying alerts that aren't critical, where you don't necessarily want to stop the execution of the program, where you just want to pop that up. All right? Now again, given that this is an async task, or I'm sorry, given that we are, this is not an async task, we're starting another activity, we specify what we want to do when that activity finishes. So right now we'll put on hold the editing of the activity. We'll pretend that we finished editing it and we've hit back to go back to this activity, or we've hit save. What happens? This onActivityResult fires off, and effectively we go and save the slideshow. And we notify that slideshow list saying that, hey, your data source has changed, therefore refresh yourself. There's a couple cases here, and activities in this context are similar to asynchronous tasks in that you fire them up and then there is a method that happens after they finish. So for example, with the async task of loading a list of slideshows, there's associated with the async task, there's the onPostExecute. That method gets fired off when that asynchronous task finishes. With this activity, we have onActivityResult, which sort of serves the same purpose. This is a notification back to the original activity, hey, the activity that you invoked is finished, now go and do something. And what are we doing? Well, we're going in and we are actually saving that slideshow. And then we're refreshing the adapter because there's now new information out there. All right, there's now another new slideshow. So that adapter, that is that list, the adapter is the data behind this list, needs to be refreshed to reflect the new slideshow that I've added. All right. Now, let's look at that slideshow editor activity. And this guy is right here. We do the typical things that we're going to do. And that involves all of these. The done button, the add picture, the take picture, the add video, the add music, and the play button. For today, I just want to look at the take picture button. All right, because that's the one that integrates with the camera. Time permitting, when we go over this Monday, we might look at some of the other functions for now, let's look at the take picture. All right. We set our on-click listener to be on take picture on-click listener. Again, well, getting ahead of myself. Again, we have our on-activity result that's going to process stuff after the activity's finished. That is, activities that this guy calls. But we're a little ahead of ourselves on that one. The on-click listener for the take picture button, again, creates another activity. So let's be sure we understand the flow of things, that when we click the take picture button, this code executes, it creates a new activity that is going to start off here. All right? What happens when this activity finishes? This method gets called back in this class. So this onActivityResult method is a method of this class that handles any activity that this class launches, sort of the wrap-up pieces of that activity. So we have this activity. It's going to invoke the take picture activity. When that finishes, this activity's onActivityResult method fires off, and then we're going to go and do something. All right? Now, this activity, the slideshow editor activity, can invoke several different activities. It can invoke the add picture activity. It can invoke the take picture, add video, add music, and so on. So the particular thing that this editor activity does is going to depend on which activity it called. So if you notice here, there's a request code that's being tested. And effectively, this is checking to see which activity got called. If we called the select picture activity, or we selected the take picture activity, we do the same thing. We go and we add that item to the slideshow. Excuse me. Otherwise, if they pick music, then we call this particular method. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself, because this is a function that fires off when that new activity finishes. So this is a function that fires off when I'm done taking the picture, I'm done selecting the picture, or I'm done adding music. How does that method know which activity finished? It knows because when we invoke the activity, we supply an ID. So, here we're starting that activity. We're starting which activity we're starting. We're starting this activity. We're telling it, we're assigning it, if you will, this ID of take picture ID. Why do we do that? We do that so that when that activity finishes and this method fires off, so that this method knows which activity finished, right? Because if you remember, this onActivityResult method gets fired off regardless of what activity this guy invokes. But obviously, depending on which activity has finished, this method is going to want to do different things. So this method needs to know which activity has just wrapped up. And it does that based on the request code that gets returned to this method. The request code that returns to the method corresponds to the request code that we assigned it when we invoke that activity. So we create that intent. Picture taker. We create that activity inside of this activity. We start it off. We assign this ID to it so that this guy's onActivityResult knows what to do with it. And then we fire up this activity. What I want to do is look here. Because this is the callback method that gets called when the user actually snaps a picture. Remember what a callback is. A callback is, we can't call that function immediately. In other words, as soon as we go into this picture taker activity, we can't call this because we have to wait until the person snaps a picture. In other words, this is an asynchronous, this is another form of an asynchronous activity. We have to wait until someone snaps the picture before we can do anything. So therefore, we assign up here somewhere the surface callback method that after they've touched the surface and taken a picture, then that picture callback gets called. So let's review the sequence of this. I click this button to go and take a picture. This pops up. All right, the camera pops up and I can take a picture of anything I want to. I've associated with this surface a touch event that says when I touch the surface, actually go and take a picture. All right? When I the surface of this, in other words, the camera has to do its thing, right? I'm sort of out of the realm of my application. Someone else has to do something, right? So we can't immediately go and start processing that picture. We have to know when the camera's finished, right? Now again, we're not talking about like waiting 10 minutes for the film to develop or anything like that. We're talking about just very short intervals of time, but still, we can assume when I've touched that the picture's been taken immediately. What we can do is we can tell the camera to take a picture, and we can give a callback method that says, when the camera finishes taking a picture, this is what I want to do. So, let's review the code from that. Here we set the on-touch listener for the surface. In other words, the picture is going to be taken when we touch the surface. So, down here is that on-touch listener. So I touch the surface, rather. What does that do? That goes and tells the camera, go ahead and take your picture. But again, we can't go and do the rest of the stuff that we need to do, because again, there could be a little bit of timing issue between us pressing that and the camera finishing its job, right? Camera focuses or does whatever it does and takes a job. Maybe the flash is going to fire, whatever. So we can't immediately process the results of that. But what we can do is we can give a callback function. And what that callback function says, effectively, is Mr. Camera, or Ms. Camera, when you are finished taking your picture, fire off this function so that we can do what we need to do with it. All right? So, we touch the surface, the on-touch event goes on, we tell the camera to snap the picture, all right? The camera, when it finishes, calls the picture callback method, and that's where the magic happens. Because on the camera, we've defined the picture callback method here that specifies on picture taken, do this. And what we're doing is we're going to take that and we're going to write that picture out to a slideshow image. And that file name is going to be the word slideshow underscore, and it's going to have the system current time in milliseconds as a postfix on the file name. We then go in and we do some things. We set the media type, we set the file name, the date, the media type. We get the URI to save the file. Keep in mind, URI in this context, Universal Resource Indicator, is going to be not out on the web somewhere, but it's going to be on our SD card. And then we try to output it.